Hello, I'm going to be doing a podcast. My name is Mast. This is a podcast about weather in Dominican Republic. I have a guest with me named Sarah. Sarah has lived in the Dominican Republic, and we're going to talk about the climate there, the weather there, and how it came to be. Sarah, would you like to briefly introduce yourself?
Sure thing. Again, my name is Sarah. I lived in the Dominican for 18 years and then moved to Boston, where I go to school. And I go back and forth to the Dominican every 4 months or so to visit my family and friends. But for the most part, I spend most days here in Boston.
Nice. Can you describe the weather there?
Yeah, so the weather,
Just
as
what
you
it
would
is
expect.
like day-to-day lifestyle.
Yeah, as you would expect, it's very warm. It feels like summer all year long. There's a lot of humidity. That's like the first thing that I noticed coming to the U.S. was how different it is, at least up here in Boston, how much more humid the DR is. And it rains a lot. Like, I feel like you wouldn't expect that, but rains are, like, even in the sunniest days, I feel like it might just randomly rain for an hour and then not at all for the rest of the day, which now that I live here in the U.S., I find really interesting.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I guess not really awesome because that doesn't sound too fun. But
No, it's not. It's not, but it is, I guess. It's very warm, so it makes it a tiny bit less warm if it rains.
okay. So we're gonna explain just how that is, why it rains so much, why it always feels like summer, why it's so humid, and all that jazz. So you know what? Let's just jump right into it. So the first thing I'm gonna try to explain, because I think it'll be easier to explain the other topics if we just start at the easiest ones, or because they all kind of just flow into each other.
Okay.
So the first one we're gonna talk about is seasons.
Mm-hmm.
So seasons are caused by the Earth's tilt. The Earth is tilted on a 23.5 degree axis, and so when it's rotating around the sun, because of this tilt, it kind of moves around like a top. So seasons happen when, depending on the angle the sun is hitting the Earth, and where your location is on the tilt of that. So to explain that a little better, we're going to be referring to ourselves in the Northern Hemisphere because both the Dominican Republic and the United States are in the Northern Hemisphere, so it's just what we all go by. So during fall and spring, the sun is hitting the equator head on. So the equator is getting all of that direct sunlight, it's getting all of that direct radiation, it's super warm, and the areas around the equator are also warm because the light is it's dispersed, right? But because of the tilt of the Earth, depending on whether or not we're in fall or spring, we're going to be feeling more or less of that radiation and that sunlight because we're going to be leaning either further into it or further away from it. So in fall, we lean farther away from it, hence why we feel less heat, and in spring, we lean more into it, so we feel more heat. So those are actually called the equinoxes, like the autumnal equinox and the vernal equinox, and that's just the day specifically when the sun hits the equator at a direct angle. So then for winter and for summer, it's similar, but instead of the sunlight hitting directly on the equator, it hits either the Tropic of Cancer or the Tropic of Capricorn. Now, Dominican Republic is really close to the Tropic of Cancer. That's the one above the equator, and the Tropic of Capricorn is the one below it. But even though the Dominican Republic isn't that close to the Tropic of Capricorn, it's still close enough so that even during our winter, like the Northern Hemisphere's winter, when the sun is hitting directly on the Tropic of Capricorn, we're still close enough that the Dominican Republic still feels a lot of that sunlight, a lot of that radiation, so much so that it still feels like summer. And then summer is the opposite, where the sun hits the Tropic of Cancer directly, and that's just super hot because that's just right where the Dominican Republic is. So in regards to the sun angle and the radiation, the more direct of an angle, the more intense it is. So, like when you shine a flashlight over a piece of paper, it makes that solid yellow dot, and it's just a really bright yellow dot. And it's just pretty small and very contained. But when you put it at an angle, it disperses. Sure. It's the same way with the sun. So when it's like directly overhead, it's super strong. And then when it's at an angle, it's not so much.
Right.
Alright, so we're going to move on to our next subject, which is the humidity in Dominican Republic. Now, one of the reasons for the humidity is the location again. Now, we already said that Dominican Republic is located right by the Tropic of Cancer. To get a better area for those of you who, for some reason, are better at longitude and latitude, we have the Dominican Republic is located at 18.7 degrees north and 70.16 degrees west. So if that helps any of you cartographers back home, you're welcome, I guess. Anyway, so because of this, first of all, I would like, Sarah, could you please explain to me what the humidity feels like in the Dominican Republic? Because I'm sure everyone back home has gone through humid days, but to actually live in an area that's consistently humid is much different than going through a humid day.
Yeah, I feel, so I never realized how humid it was till I left it, and then I was like, wow, even breathing feels differently. Whenever I fly back home, I always need to make sure that my hair is short, because once I get there, my hair just puffs up, and it just feels very sweaty, it feels extra moist. My skin gets less dry, which is, I think, a plus, until it gets too sweaty, and then there's no plus at all. It's just disgusting and sticky. So even there's always obviously pros, and when I'm out here and it's very dry and it's very hard to breathe and everything is just feels very, very dry, it's I miss the humidity, but being back home, it's just everything is sticky, everything is extra warm, everything is extra wet. It makes you want to shower 4 times a day. And oftentimes, most Dominicans actually do. Most Dominicans shower 3 times a day, and that's just, how it goes.
That's just a normal thing.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised. So there are a couple of things that can contribute to that humidity. One of the things is sea breezes and land breezes. So, they're kind of the same thing, but reversed. I had my notes. Where'd they go? I'll just copy it. Do it. I'll cut it after your thingy. After your thing. Where?
Yeah.
Where did I not write that? Oh God! You know what?
Notebook.
Yeah, they're all in my notebook. I thought I put everything in my notebook on my Google Doc, but I did not.
You did not.
Okay. I am not surprised. That sounds very humid. So we're gonna try to explain what is causing that humidity. So there are a couple of things that could be factors in it. One of those things are sea and land breezes. So sea and land breezes are kind of the same thing but reversed. So a sea breeze occurs during the day. It's when you have land next to ocean, a body of water, and the land heats up faster than the ocean water does, causing a low pressure inland, and then this low pressure causes the high pressure over the ocean, because it's not so much that the pressure over the ocean raised as it is just the pressure on land lowered. Because high versus low pressure is a comparison, so much there's not the high pressure didn't increase necessarily. It's just high compared to the low pressure. Okay. So the land gets heated by the sun. It gets heated up faster than the ocean water, so it causes low pressure. Then the high pressure from the ocean water winds up flowing towards the low pressure over the land, bringing ocean wind with it. So just it adds to that moisture. And then the land breeze is that, but reversed, where at night the land cools faster than the ocean water, making it a higher pressure over land and a lower pressure over the water. So then the wind from the land starts flowing towards the water. And that's how that works. And that could add to that humidity just overall in the air. But that's not the main thing. The main thing is actually going to be just the amount of low pressure. But before I jump into that, I want to add one more other factor that is a reason why humidity gets trapped in both Boston and in Dominican Republic. It's because in specific urban areas, the heating from like the buildings and the concrete and the glass everywhere, just like in cities primarily and suburban areas, they stay hotter and they radiate more heat, in that like they get heated up during the day and they don't cool down as fast or as much as homes in rural areas do, because of all the concrete and materials and building things nearby. This is actually called the urban island effect, the urban heat island effect. So that happens obviously here in Boston because this is a huge, or well, actually a decently sized city.
One could argue.
And there are a couple of big spots in DR, aren't there?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Cool. I know there are a lot of like resorts, but are there a lot of just like cities?
Yeah, there's two main cities, one in Santo Domingo, one in Santiago, and I live in Santo Domingo, and I can kind of understand what you mean. I do feel like it's more humid when I am in the city than like when I go to like the countryside where my mom was born, where there are a lot more trees and there's a lot more it's kind of like a small forest.
Yeah, because the heat it gets trapped within all those buildings.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so like I said before, those were only two small factors contributing to the general humidity of Dominican Republic. So one of the main factor is this constant low pressure. So warm air leads to low pressures. So because of the location of the Dominican Republic that's in that tropical area that's always receiving all that sunlight, the air there is very warm. And so warm air is different than cold air in that it has a couple of different qualities. First off, it's less dense. And so if you think about just the qualities of water, think about water vapor, like the molecules in water vapor versus the molecules in ice. Because it's not the same, but it's kind of similar. So warm air, vapor, when the air is like really hot, the molecules can move freely. They're moving faster. Cold air, the molecules are still moving about freely, but they move slower. Whereas like think about it in water, when it's a solid, they vibrate. They're still moving, but they're not moving as freely. But I don't want you to think that cold air molecules move like ice molecules do, because they do not. Okay. They do not. They just move less freely than warm air.
Gotcha.
So because of their speed and their lower density, they have more energy. And so with cold air, the water vapor can escape when it gets condensated, when it condenses. But warm air, that is not the case, and there's actually more room for water vapor because there's less water vapor escaping through condensation. So as the temperature increases, the capacity for water vapor actually increases as well, because less air is escaping through, because less water, is escaping through condensation. So that's low pressure. So that all kind of connects to like this humidity, but not only that, it also connects to the rain. So we're gonna jump right into that next. Hey everybody, we're gonna jump right into that rain. So like we were saying earlier, the Dominican Republic has a lot of unpredictable rain, and the low pressure surrounding it kind of builds into that, and I'm gonna explain how. But first off, I just want to say a little fun fact about the Dominican Republic and its location again. So because of the area that it's at, where it's consistently getting rain and precipitation, and it's just always wet. It actually got the nickname the doldrums. Doldrum is a state of inactivity or stagnation. So because it's like the weather there is always in the same state, just rainy and wet, it got that nickname. So obviously this low pressure contributes to that, whatchamacallit, participation, humidity, the raininess, the wetness, all that gross stuff. And because we already said earlier, it holds more vapors, there's more participation. So what we didn't talk about though is clouds yet. So clouds form more more rainy clouds over low pressure. When the relative humidity is over 70%, that's when participation is more likely to occur, and that's usually around the thickest part of a cloud layer. And the thickest part of a cloud layer is about, let me find the fact, and the thickest part about,
Thick. There are so many clouds in the DR.
Yeah. Okay. So the rainier clouds, they hold, when the relative humidity is more than 70%, that's when those clouds are more likely to have participation. That's when you're more likely to get that rain. And that is often occurring, that's occurring in the thickest part of the cloud layer, which is usually occurring around a low pressure. So the Dominican Republic is perfect for that because there's just low pressure everywhere. And just to give a numerical value to that, the pressure heights for participation forming is usually between 850 and 500 millibars, and that's roughly 5,000 to 180,000 feet. Yeah, so that happens, and that makes a huge part of the rain. But the Dominican Republic is also located in that special intertropical convergence zone. And the intertropical convergence zone is where the trade winds converge and create storms. So the intertropical convergence zone is literally like a belt of basically random thunderstorms just occurring across the Caribbean because of these trade winds. Trade winds are just winds flowing in from the northeast. They're created by subtropical heights. Subtropical heights are just high pressure centers found around like the 30-degree latitude, which is kind of like where Boston is. It's not exactly, but it's like around that area.
Okay.
And so those pressure centers, the high pressure winds, the pressure centers create winds, and those winds are converging aloft. So that creates the trade winds, which then creates the intertropical convergence zone, where all those winds are converging, and then the low pressure in that zone winds up forming because of an intense heating that leads to an expansion of air mass. So that expansion of the air mass gives the molecules in the air more room to wiggle,
Right.
Making them faster, giving them like less pressure because there's the same amount of molecules but more air for them to be free in, so there's like less pressure. Kind of like it's almost like if you think about like a soda bottle, like if you shake it up and then you release it, if you have a bunch of soda and a little bit of room left, when you shake it up and you open it, it's going to explode everywhere. But if you have very little soda in there and you shake it up, it's not going to explode.
Right.
It's literally just like that.
Yeah.
So that's that. That's the literally random precipitation like during a whole day. Like it's raining for just like 3 hours and then it goes away, or it's just raining for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
That's due to the ITCZ. So what we're going to jump into next is the participation at different areas of the island, specifically how the actual geographical climate affects the participation and the lifestyle there. Okay, everybody, we're going to be jumping into the different participation around the island and how the terrain affects it. Basically, what we're going to be talking about is orographic lift. So, the Dominican Republic has a couple mountain ranges, and mountain ranges affect the participation and like the weather because of that, because of the way they affect the airflow around the mountain range. So orographic lift is a perfect example of that. Orographic lift is when air rises or lifts up, hence lift. When air is forced upwards or lifted upwards because of a rising terrain. So when air goes from a lower area to a higher area because it's like flowing up some form of terrain. So for Dominican Republic, it would be a mountain. For other areas, it could be a hill, certain things. It depends where you're studying. But right now we're talking about Dominican Republic. So as the air is increasing in altitude, it winds up cooling down adiabatically, which winds up raising the relative humidity to up to 100%. It doesn't actually raise it all the way to 100%, but it can. And this winds up creating clouds, and with the right conditions, it can create precipitation. So because of this, the windward side of a mountain, so the side that's getting hit by the wind, can have significantly more participation than the leeward side or like the downwind side. So just to give some examples about the effects of this orographic lift, Santo Domingo, the capital, which winds up on the southern coast, it is not protected by mountain ranges, so the rainfall there winds up being up to 1,400 millimeters, about 57 inches per year. But on Ocoa Bay, is that how you pronounce it? Ocoa? Yeah. So in Azua, is that how you pronounce it? Yeah. Azua on the coast of the Ocoa Bay, they only wind up getting 640 millimeters, so about 25 inches of rain per year because they have that mountain so close. So it can actually make... Okay, so we've talked about the weather and the climate of Dominican Republic, but we haven't talked about the effects of it. So I did a little bit of research, and I found that the effects of warm weather and the effects of cold weather have different results on the mind. So in general, the results I got were, I thought, interesting and contrary to my own personal beliefs. So, and me as a Dominican who is not as in touch with their culture yet because I don't live in the Dominican Republic, I'm interested to hear your points of view in this because you're living in warmer weather for the most part and I'm living in colder weather for the most part. So we have like different areas of experience.
Yeah.
So the research that I found out was that cold weather tends to make people more depressed. It tends to make people more empathetic. And it tends to not have an effect on their thought process in the way that warm weather does. And I'll explain that when I get into warm weather, which will be literally right now. So, what I mean by that is warm weather can actually make you lazier in your thought process. A study was done where like people were given a choice like to go to a convenience store, right? And you have to choose between like buying a lotto ticket, buying a snack, buying a soda, like what do you want to buy? And people take more time and wind up buying more things that they don't need in warmer weather, and like they just wind up being like slower and like just like a little bit lazier, but not in like, I guess not in like the conventional way that you think of lazy, just in like they're just slower in their thought process.
Okay.
Whereas in colder weather, people were going in and out real quick, just knew what they wanted, got right out of there, and that was that. Warm weather also winds up making people happier, but it also makes people angrier and more violent. There are more violent crimes in areas of high temperatures. So I thought that was interesting because I feel like being angry and being happy are almost contradictory emotions, but I can see why. I actually remember studying The Great Gatsby, and my English teacher made an entire lecture discussion about how the weather was affecting them towards the end because it was like a super hot day at the end.
Right, and then
Yeah.
that was the most chaotic
Yup.
part of the entire book, yeah.
Yup.
Arguably. Yeah.
So, what do you think about that? Do you think warm weather makes you chaotic?
Yes. Absolutely. I personally don't like warmer weather. So I mean, there may be a million other factors going into that, but I'm not trying to say that the weather doesn't have, like an influence in that. But I do feel a lot more chaotic, a lot angrier, a lot more just ready to go out and do things and more active when I'm in warmer weathers. Whereas being in the U.S. in the cold, I'm less likely to do those things, but I also find myself happier in cold weather. And I think that mainly the reason why a lot of people get depressed in cold weathers is has more to do with seasonal depression due to darkness and it being dark at 5 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the Dominican, time doesn't change. We don't have what do you guys call it here? The not time saving, energy saving.
Oh, daily savings time.
Daily saving. There you go.
Yeah.
We don't have that. And I feel like a lot of it has everything to do with it being dark outside more so than it being cold. But I like the cold, so that might just be my biased opinion. But I do get pretty angry. I do get pretty chaotic, and we do consume a lot more alcohol because it's warmer and you want to drink more beer. You want to have more beverages in your body, which obviously makes you
more susceptible to being
exactly,
angry
and all of those other things. And people say that it's part of the culture, but it might have everything to do with the climate too.
See, that's exactly what I was wondering, because I was thinking okay, if these are the effects that warm weather has, what does this mean for the cultures that have consistent, this weather consistently? Does it mean that these people are consistently happy, lazy, violent, and angry? Are they consistently depressed, empathetic, all that jazz? And obviously, you can't make any
generalizations.
I can't grand generalizations. But it's interesting to think about it, because when I think about Latin America and a lot of just warm weather countries, me personally, I'm Dominican, I'm Brazilian, so I celebrate those customs. Those are the cultures that I know the most about, even though I still don't know that much about those cultures because I'm still working towards that. I view them as very, very happy, carefree, loving people. That is actually the stereotype of a Brazilian is just hey, I just want to party.
Yeah. We always want to party. We're always ready to invite people, be very welcoming and warm.
Yeah, and it goes down into their own lifestyle and their whole culture. And I'm wondering if it's because they spend so much time in the sun, because I feel it's a lot easier to be happy and to be loving and to be appreciative of life in general when you're chilling on a beach than when you're freezing in a blizzard. But at the same time, I feel
there's also the machismo that exists and is so prevalent in Hispanic countries. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of violence. That's not to say that it's just in these spaces, but I the angry part of it, the violent part of it, somehow it just makes sense to me. If you're not sad, if you're not experiencing those emotions, you might just be experiencing them in a very different way. Mm-hmm. And focusing on them culturally or otherwise, just in different ways.
Mm-hmm. Because then also what I was thinking about, so you know how earlier I told you about that study about the people going into the convenience store and how if they were warmer, they took more time to think about it.
Yeah.
And how if they were colder, they got in and got out. Well, I think a good reason for that is if you're cold, you want to get home as quick as you can. Mm-hmm. You're not trying to spend as much time as you want just dilly-dallying about your day, whereas when you're in warm weather, you're comfortable enough that you can. So I feel that could have a factor in it too, or at least with that study. I don't know. I just think it's interesting to think how cold weather and warm weather can affect us.
Yeah.
So in regards to that specifically, as an international student, I'm curious, how do you think the weather affects you coming back home and leaving to and from over breaks and things? I'm sure that can't be easy going from one crazy climate to another.
Yeah, going home, every time I go home, I feel like I always get sick whenever I, like, either get to the Dominican or come back here. Especially if I travel for, like, winter break, and then I come back here and it's freezing out. I do feel a lot more sensitive to the weather as soon as I get to the place. Like, if I just got to the Dominican, I feel a lot more sensitive to the warmth. And I feel very, very, very warm all the time. Or when I come back here, and I just got here, I feel very sensitive to the cold. And then, like, my whole body has to adjust. So, it is challenging. It makes it really hard. But honestly, I still enjoy more coming back here to the cold than going back there to the warmth. Because I feel like the warm and the humidity is just too much. Like, I really don't appreciate it. And it's the whole year, because at least here I can, like, if it's winter break, then it's cold. But then if it's, like, if I come back from, like, spring break or something, it's, like, less cold, so it's not as bad. Where in the Dominican, it's, like, it always feels very warm, even though we know that it's not summer the whole year.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your input. This was a great podcast. I learned a lot. I hope you did too. I hope whoever's watching this wound up learning some stuff. Thank you very much for joining me.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Good night, everybody.